What if your personality isn't actually your personality at all?
Oh, that's a heavy question to start with.
Right. But think about it. What if the quirks you totally identify with, like the fact that you're a night owl or that you wear the exact same 3 shirts every week?
Or that you desperately need that 3 p.m. coffee to survive.
Yes, exactly. What if all of that is just, a patchwork of artificial coping mechanisms you built just to survive your 9 to 5 job?
I mean, it is a slightly terrifying thought. But when you really look closely at how we spend our hours, the line between who we are and, well, how we cope gets very blurry.
It really does.
Yeah.
And today we are putting the invisible architecture of your life under the microscope for this deep dive.
Yeah, we're looking at a pretty fascinating source document today.
We are. It's from an English learning channel called Spoken English Now. It's this transcribed dialogue titled Rhythms of Daily Life, featuring 2 people, Emma and Noah.
And they basically just walk through their exact same 24-hour cycle, right?
Yeah, literally from the morning alarm to the moment they fall asleep.
Which, on the surface, it's just a simple conversation meant for language learners. But beneath that, it's this spectacular, high-contrast behavioral study.
Oh, 100%. We're essentially watching 2 humans deploy completely different strategies to manage their physical energy and their psychological autonomy against the relentless demands of the modern world.
It's wild how different they are.
So as you listen today, I want you to think about your own daily rhythms. Like, how much of your routine is truly you? Are you more of an Emma, a Noah, or some chaotic mix of both?
Most people are definitely a mix.
True. Okay, let's unpack this, because chronologically, we have to start at the morning divide.
Right, the moment the world wakes up.
Yes, and this is where the contrast is just glaringly obvious. Emma is a self-proclaimed morning person. She wakes up early, like often before the sun, craving the absolute silence of the house.
No cars, no noise, just peace.
Exactly. And notice her mechanism for waking up. She doesn't use a standard blaring alarm.
No, she uses a soft music track. She actually describes it as a gentle way to say hello to the day.
A gentle way to say hello. And then she makes coffee with hot milk, sits by the window to just think, and prepares a really time-intensive breakfast.
Like eggs or yogurt with fruit.
Right. And then you have Noah.
Oh, Noah.
Noah calls the morning his old enemy. He battles this loud, aggressive beep, beep, beep alarm clock, hits the snooze button repeatedly until he is in a sheer panic.
Just massive anxiety.
Yeah, and then he jumps out of bed yelling, "I'm late."
His physiological state is entirely different from Emma's.
Yeah.
I mean, he skips the hot milk for strong, black coffee, practically running to the machine.
And while he drinks it, he immediately grabs his phone and doom scrolls the news and his work emails.
Just letting the stress right in.
Yes. He grabs a fast banana or a piece of toast and runs out the door. I look at this and I think about the morning alarm as like a negotiation for your autonomy.
I like that analogy.
Right. Emma treats the morning like a delicate negotiation where she is the one setting the terms. She's inviting the day in.
And Noah treats the morning like a hostile takeover.
Exactly, defending against it. But I have to push back on Noah's narrative here. He claims he hates the morning hour itself.
You don't buy that.
Not entirely. Is it the time on the clock he despises, or is it the fact that he deliberately floods his brain with the stress of the entire globe via his phone screen within 3 minutes of waking up?
That is a very fair point. What's fascinating here is the underlying biology of what you're describing.
Okay, tell me.
So there is a physiological mechanism called the cortisol awakening response, or AR.
AR. Got it.
Yeah. When humans wake up, our bodies naturally release a spike of cortisol, stress hormone, just to get us moving.
So it's supposed to happen.
Right. It's a biological feature, not a bug. But Emma and Noah interact with this natural spike completely differently.
Basically, Emma is riding the wave and Noah is drowning in it.
Essentially, yes. By waking up in the silence and sitting by the window, Emma allows that cortisol to naturally metabolize.
Her nervous system gets a chance to settle.
Exactly. She establishes a baseline of internal control. But Noah, by hitting snooze, which fragments his sleep and induces sleep inertia, by the way.
Ugh, the worst feeling.
Yeah, and then immediately looking at work emails, he adds an acute psychological stressor on top of his biological cortisol spike.
Wow.
He's basically hijacking his own awakening response and operating from a baseline of external panic.
Which is an awful way to live. But, part of me wonders if Noah doom scrolls not because he wants to be stressed, but because his sleep inertia is so heavy from hitting snooze.
That he needs the adrenaline.
Yes, like he actively needs the adrenaline hit of a scary news headline just to force his brain out of theta waves and into an active, waking state.
That is a very distinct possibility. He is using external stimuli as a crude tool to force alertness, whereas Emma relies on her internal circadian rhythm.
It makes total sense.
But this concept of internal versus external control dictates their next major hurdle too, getting dressed and commuting.
Right, the preparation for the public world. Both of them use a hot shower to wake up, but staring into the closet, their strategies, they diverge again.
Completely.
Emma looks at her shirts, pants, and dresses and is instantly hit with that universal feeling, I have nothing to wear.
The classic dilemma.
Yeah, she's paralyzed by choice in front of a closet she says is full of memories.
While Noah entirely bypasses this.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Noah has a rigidly defined system. He proudly states he only owns blue, white, and gray shirts.
That's it.
That's it. He reaches in, grabs one blindly, and he is done. His exact quote is, no thinking. Thinking is for later in the day.
Wow.
It's like decision fatigue armor, like a cartoon character wearing the exact same outfit every episode to save brain power.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Noah's demonstrating a textbook understanding of cognitive load and ego depletion.
Ego deplete.
Yeah, so every single choice you make, no matter how trivial, like what shirt to wear, consumes a measurable amount of glucose in the brain.
So you're literally spending energy just looking at your closet.
Exactly. It depletes your working memory resources. So Noah is brilliantly conserving his cognitive load for the high-stakes demands of his job.
I mean, I understand the science of that, but I find it a little tragic, to be honest.
Tragic. How so?
Is it really brilliant, or is it just a sad reality of modern work? He is literally erasing his personal expression, adopting a self-imposed uniform, just so he can be a more efficient gear in the corporate machine at 10 a.m.
That's one way to look at it, sure.
Meanwhile, Emma is willing to spend some of her brain's glucose to curate her appearance. She's holding on to her identity.
It really depends on how you value energy allocation. You see it as erasing identity, but Noah likely sees it as protecting his most valuable asset, his focus.
Fair point.
But notice how the power dynamics of autonomy flip entirely when they leave their homes for the commute.
Oh, this is the perfect inversion.
Right.
Noah, who just ruthlessly protected his mental autonomy with his minimalist wardrobe, willingly surrenders all his physical autonomy.
That takes the bus.
A squeezed, crowded bus. And because he hates crowded places, he builds an artificial wall. He puts on headphones and blasts podcasts to isolate himself.
He has no physical bubble, so he constructs an auditory one to endure the environmental compression.
Exactly. And Emma, who expended her mental energy choosing outfit, reclaims total physical autonomy by driving her own car.
But her environment throws a different obstacle at her.
Maddening stop-and-go traffic. But her coping mechanism isn't isolation like Noah's. She turns up her stereo and sings at the top of her lungs.
Noah survives by retreating inward and detaching. Emma survives by expanding outward and filling her private physical space with her own voice.
Both are highly effective emotional regulation tactics before they hit the absolute homogenization of the modern office.
The 9-to-5 mold.
Right. Because once they arrive at work, their contrasting, highly personalized mornings just vanish into the exact same reality.
A mountain of emails.
Yes. Both describe being immediately buried in reading, writing meetings, and constant talking.
The environment finally forces them into identical behavioral patterns. But the cracks show when we look at how they seek a midday respite.
Oh, lunch is a huge divergence. Emma, staying true to her organized self, brings a homemade salad or sandwich.
Which is very practical.
It is. Her reasoning is that it's healthy, and buying lunch every day is a waste of money.
And Noah.
Noah entirely admits he lacks the organization to pack a lunch. He escapes to a local cafe, but he explicitly says he does this because it forces him to walk outside for 10 minutes.
So Emma is optimizing for nutritional and financial efficiency. Noah is intuitively optimizing for psychological pacing.
Yes, and I'll go a step further. I think Noah actually has the superior strategy here.
Really? Even though he's spending the money?
Hear me out. On paper, Emma looks like the healthy one with her homemade salad. But eating at your desk while staring at a spreadsheet is soul-crushing.
It's true.
Noah recognizes that humans are not biologically designed to sit under fluorescent lights staring at a two-dimensional screen for 8 continuous hours.
No, we definitely aren't.
By forcing a financial transaction at a cafe, he forces his body into sunlight, breaks the visual plane of his monitor, and creates a hard, physical boundary with his work.
I agree with you, actually. He's utilizing the environment to enforce a break his brain desperately needs.
He has to.
And they both need that environmental intervention to survive what happens next. The universally dreaded 3 p.m. slump.
Oh, the hour the biological debt collector arrives.
Exactly. At 3 p.m., both of their eyes get heavy. Noah, who has been running on cortisol and black coffee since dawn, reaches for a cookie and more coffee.
A recipe for a crash.
And Emma reaches for an apple or green tea.
So what's happening to them biologically at 3 p.m.?
What we're looking at here is the collision of two biological processes.
Mm-hmm.
In chronobiology, there is process S, which is sleep pressure.
Okay, what causes that?
It's caused by the continuous buildup of a chemical called adenosine in the brain from the moment you wake up.
So it's like a biochemical hourglass.
Exactly. And that hourglass pressure collides in the mid-afternoon with process C, which is your circadian rhythm, which naturally dips around 3 p.m.
So they're getting hit from both sides.
Right. Both Emma and Noah are using food and caffeine not for nutrition, but as a pharmacological intervention.
They're medicating themselves.
Pretty much. They are artificially stimulating their nervous systems to push through a biological valley just to reach the end of the workday.
Which finally happens at 5 p.m. The retreat home begins.
The best part of the day.
And this brings us to the evening routine and, quite frankly, the absolute strangest moment in the source text.
Yes, the evening wind-down reveals a massive anomaly in their documentation.
Okay, let me set the stage for you. They both get home, shed their work selves, and put on sweats and T-shirts.
Very normal.
Then they handle dinner. Noah, the chaotic guy who eats a fast banana in the morning, finds cooking deeply relaxing. He methodically chops vegetables and makes soup.
It's a great subversion.
It is. And Emma, the mindful morning person who makes eggs from scratch, finds dinner incredibly stressful. She confesses she is such a bad cook she wants burned water.
Burned water.
Which I assume means she boiled a pot completely dry and scorched the metal, so she relies on simple pasta or ordering pepperoni pizza.
So the reactive morning person becomes the mindful evening chef, while the proactive morning person taps out and orders takeout.
Exactly. But then the pets.
Ah, yes, the pets.
So what does this all mean? Let me lay out the exact facts from the transcript. When Emma gets home from her car commute, she explicitly states that she walks through the door and is greeted by her dog, Max.
Right, she has a dog.
She says he jumps and barks. Noah describes returning from his bus ride and opening his door to his bossy cat, Bella, who meows and demands food.
So the pets are clearly established. Emma has the dog, Max.
Yeah.
Noah has the cat, Bella.
Right. But then we move later into the evening. They've eaten their pizza and soup. Emma says she's sitting on her big red sofa, and then...
Wait for it.
Bella the cat decides she loves her, sits on her, and falls asleep.
On Emma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Noah is talking about his post-dinner unwinding and casually mentions he has to go take Max the dog for a night walk under the stars.
This raises an important question about the very nature of the test we are analyzing.
I mean, did they swap houses? Did the pets take the bus to the other person's apartment?
It's a mystery.
Did Emma and Noah meet in an alleyway at 8 p.m. and trade animals? Is this a glitch in the simulation?
Realistically, it's obviously a transcript error.
Yeah.
The creators of the English learning dialogue likely just mixed up their own character notes.
Ah, for sure.
But metaphorically, it's a brilliant, unintentional reminder that when we try to cleanly document our daily routines, the boundaries are never actually that rigid. Life is fluid.
I am choosing to believe they have a complex, secret pet-sharing arrangement.
Oh, absolutely.
Noah needs the forced physical activity of a dog walk to clear his head, and Emma needs the stationary, weighted blanket effect of a sleeping cat on the sofa. They figured out the perfect energetic swap.
I love that interpretation. But, beyond the pet mystery, the end of their night reveals one final, incredibly telling paradox.
Oh, yes.
And it centers entirely on Emma's bedtime routine.
Yes. Let's look at how they sleep. Noah, who loathes the morning, is hyper-disciplined at night.
Very disciplined.
He is in bed by 10 p.m., reads a book for 10 minutes, and is asleep instantly. He sets his future self up for success.
Because he respects the biological necessity of sleep, knowing the morning will be a battle.
But Emma claims to truly love the dawn. The morning is her sanctuary. Yet after the pizza and the mysterious cat cuddles, what does she do?
She stays up.
She watches funny movies. She admits to going down internet rabbit holes. She stays up until midnight.
She does.
She willfully creates a massive sleep deficit, physically sabotaging the very morning she claims to cherish. Why would she do that?
Because she is exhibiting a textbook case of revenge bedtime procrastination.
Revenge bedtime. Against who?
Against the structure of her own day. It's a real psychological phenomenon where people who feel they lack control over their daytime hours due to, endless emails, traffic, corporate demands, They refuse to sleep at night in order to regain some sense of freedom.
Wow.
Even though Emma loves the morning, she spends her entire day conforming to external pressures. The only time nobody wants anything from her is midnight.
That is so sad, but so true.
So she steals that time back, even if it hurts her tomorrow. Noah reclaims his autonomy by cooking a methodical soup. Emma reclaims hers by doom-scrolling movies at midnight.
That is profound. She is sacrificing her biological health for psychological freedom.
Exactly.
Noah says at one point in the transcript, it's a big circle, isn't it? And he's completely right.
He is. It shows us that from the uniformity of our clothes, to the way we endure a crowded commute, to how we artificially pace our energy at 3 p.m.
Correct.
with a cookie, the mundane, repetitive elements of our lives are intensely, deeply personal.
Which is exactly what we set out to prove. The invisible architecture of your life is not a series of boring accidents. It's a highly specific survival strategy.
It really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you directly, which camp do you fall into? Are you hitting the snooze button right now, treating the morning like a hostile takeover?
Or are you sipping hot milk, trying to negotiate a peace treaty with the day?
Most likely, you're a complex mixture of both, navigating the demands of your specific environment.
Yeah, we all do what we have to do.
Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how Emma and Noah's routines reflect their personalities. But what if those routines are just the armor they wear for the modern world?
That's the real question.
If you stripped away your job, your commute, and all of the grueling demands of modern capitalism, what would your natural routine actually look like? Who would you be if you didn't have to be anywhere at 9 a.m.?
Something to think about the next time your alarm goes off.
Absolutely. We will catch you next time.